Hello, Internet. It's time for another Wednesday's cereal. Bum bum bum. Yo, it is back on, and I thought I'd take a few comics from last week that I didn't get to because I wasn't thinking much about it, but after hearing some stuff, I thought I need to put my 2 cents out there for everyone to hear because my opinion is so important. So let's get to it. Birds of Prey, Volume 2, Number 6. Aw, yeah. Now, I will say this. This is considered part 2 of Heart of Pain, Life of War, or part 2 of Two Nights in Bangkok. That's one problem with comics. Too many titles, like 3 titles for one thing. Anyways, so what's interesting to me is this is supposed to be the second story arc, but really these first 6 issues are all one story arc. So that titling kind of bugged me, but oh well. The story wrapping up was strong. The writing, I of course thought was brilliant, but that aside, again, 2 artists starting, and throughout the book you have these different teams, and it's not that either one sucked, but it's this jarring difference, and it's just find someone, stick with them that's going to put it out on time and do it, because it's so jarring to have these artists come in, and even if they do a good job, and even if they have similar styles, it's really easy to tell, and it really pulls you out of the book so quickly. It's kind of like having a centerfold that you have to fold out and go the other way. It just pulls you out of the book. It's unfortunate. Booster Gold! What price, glory! Which is a riff off of this magazine that came out last year, which said, what price, fame! But I don't think too many people picked up on that. I just might have happened to be in the know of that. Or maybe they just went with What Price Glory because it sounds epic and stupid. You know, very Booster Gold-esque. But this is a great, more or less throwaway issue. There's a little bit at the beginning, at the end that tie into the overarching story that's barely been touched upon most issues. But in it you have this kind of mock satire version of Captain America and Bucky, and doing the whole World War II thing. The whole time Booster's saying like, I just want to kick some Nazis' heads in. He's going, you can't mess with the timeline. Who knows how that could affect things. It's like, they're damn Nazis, who cares? And it's just kind of one of those mentality things. It was a fun issue, and it may not be the best comic to pick up out of all the other, but I mean, it is still $2.99, and it's always an enjoyable read, and those Booster Gold issues are fun to go back to, because you don't have to read long arcs at a time to get something out of it, but they're just always enjoyable, so yeah, why not anymore? I mean, there was a run for a while where Booster Gold wasn't good. Don't pick that stuff up. Pick up the good stuff, where it was Johns and now Giffen doing it. Anything else in between, screw them. Now, other reviewers have their pick of the week. Well, I have my pick of the week for this week. Chew 15 was my pick for most freaking disappointing thing I read this week. And it wasn't even the worst comic, but for every other issue of Chew, this fell so fantastically short. Especially considering it's supposed to be wrapping up the arc, and it did none of that. It just kind of tossed things aside, whereas the last issue kind of wrapped things up better, but this was like a Thanksgiving issue, which, for the food-centric comic of the year, oh boy. But it just it starts off with this long sequence with Savoy that took up pages. That was this very cinematic idea, and if it was a movie, it would have been very powerful. But again, wrong medium. So it's just these pages that are like, I get the idea. He's flashing back. OMG. And so then you go on, and then you learn all this bit about Chew's family, but it's like, it's interesting from a character standpoint, but it's not really tied to anything else, and so it's kind of quirky and fun, but really... Plus, I mean, who's ever heard of the Great Thanksgiving episode? I mean, Friends tried it, and, well, Friends, whatever, but just saying, doesn't really usually pan out, and only very sitcom-y, even with the way they did it here. Just, this comic, I mean, I wish there was more to talk about, actually. I mean, it sounds like I'm not complaining about much there, but that's part of the problem for a comic that's normally so dense and has all these different angles. Just wasn't there. I mean, there's a couple of surprises, sure, but beyond the shock value, much like a bad Mark Millar comic, not much to it. And of course, I had to talk about big time, The Amazing Spider-Man. The ending of this year-long One More Day bit and starting of the slot-esque only run. And it was an incredible issue, considering where the art's been for the past several months, and thus over a year's worth of a normal comic of Spider-Man. Not so great, from my opinion. I understood that it had some artistic merit, but really, yeah. And Zeb Wells is interesting, but there's actually one part where you have the chameleon pretending to be Steve Rogers. Spoilers, but not really. Oh no, the chameleon's pretending to be someone. What else would he be doing? And so they kind of allude to it with what's supposed to be the dark overshadowed eyes, which would be something somewhere else, but because of Zeb Wells' facial features and the way that the colorist and inker did it, it's so heavy most of the time anyways. I was like, is that supposed to be ominous, or is he just in a backlit situation? Could be one, could be the other, and honestly, who knows? And I found out later, oh yeah, it was ominous. Who knew? That was more on the writing, and that's another thing. Dan Slott wrote this amazing issue, and there's this great intro with the Avengers, which you could read in previews if you're so inclined to find. I'm not going to link you because the comic's out. Go buy it. Support comics. They don't make enough money, especially Marvel Comics being funded by Disney. So, yeah. And so it goes through this issue, and there's a great twist where the Parker Luck thing was abandoned, though. People who are arguing that, I think his name was Blue Balls, was one of the reviewer. Anyways, he mentioned the Parker Luck not being there, which is kind of bull, because people, I think, forget that in order for someone to fall, they have to be risen first. They can't do some anti-spiral thing like they did with Daredevil, where they just found a new low. You can't do that every time. And also, this was supposed to be a huge jumping on point. Not a number one issue jumping on point, but, you know, big jumping on point. And frankly, if you hadn't been reading Spider-Man for about the last year, a lot of the points would have been lost on you completely. So, it's a great comic, but I mean, I love Spider-Man, but I've been reading him since I was a fetus. And so that sort of thing doesn't bug me, but I can see where other people would be like, what are they talking about here? No Mary Jane as a romantic partner. But why? She's only a cynical bitch that's turned him down at every point and then only kept him strung along enough to keep him going. I mean, sure, she's a supermodel, it's to be expected, but anyway. But while you're here, I had a couple other things that I wanted to talk about, and that's what you tune in for, or not. The first one is, oh my god, Batman and Robin 16, where Bruce Wayne comes out and says that he's been secretly funding Batman since nearly the beginning. Why not just the beginning? Doesn't matter. But then, besides a few other points to that frame, people are arguing, oh no, ramifications, and coming back and pointing out how Spider-Man came out to the public. And honestly, I don't think it's going to have that effect. I mean, from a plot standpoint, yes, it's just kind of incredibly stupid. But the idea that he's funding Batman and not saying that he's Batman, sure, people could tie it together. People could tie together that Clark Kent is Superman, but no. And it's a little more likely that you peg Bruce Wayne as Batman, but it's a comic book. That plot point can slide. It's slidden thus far, except for Ra's al Ghul. For some reason, some foreigner can just swing in and figure out, but, you know, people closely tied to the two characters just can't quite put their thumb on it. So I don't see why they suddenly would snap out of their retardation after decades of buildup of not. Anyways, it's just odd to me that people are pulling this apart. I'm just thinking, yeah, it ties the Wayne thing to Bruce, to Batman a bit more, and okay, that's all well and good. But overall, this just seems like a plot point that can easily be forgotten and slid away, rather than, like, say, the Spider-Man identity thing, where they had to do some painful things to get over it. Speaking of painful things, with death being in the season, or going around the flu, depending on how you look at it, Spider-Man is slated to die again. Sure, he supposedly died just 3 years ago, which would make his death almost Jean Grey-esque for the frequency that it's going at now. But they're apparently shooting for it, and I'm hoping it's just a gimmick and where he doesn't actually die in the story or whatever. But if it pans out to be that way, I'd like to recommend everyone to not read it, because it's most likely going to suck. There hasn't been a good major superhero death since pretty much ever. Just pointing that out. Yeah, so y'all have a good week. Feel free to like, comment, ask any questions you might have about my crazy opinions. And I'll catch you later.